Thank you. A couple of questions came in, but first, by way of a report. And that is, with 80 people noting what the church would receive on an annualized basis if they gave a proportionate giving of 5% a week, this congregation, just you assembled here, would have a budget of $553,280.
Wow.
Say that number again?
Yes.
$553,280. If this assembly right here gave 5%, now that would mean I would have to reduce my giving, right, for that 5%. And a couple of others here said that, right? They give more than 5%. So that's on a reduced basis from what some of you give. Now the question is, would you know what to do with 553,000? And that's why we're going to end this session with a case, right? How to build the case, because that's one of the things that this book that John Krey and I have been advocating talks about, what we have to do in this current climate when everybody's competing for your members' money, right? It's not that your members are not giving, they're just not necessarily giving to you, right? And not giving as a priority, right? They're not giving off the top to you meaning your ministry, right? Because there's so many competitors out there who, according to Cliff, are doing it so much better than we are. They know how to market themselves. Now, a couple of other questions that came up, and I told you I would try to address them. I'll do them briefly, because what we're going to do in this next session is we're going to slog through a couple models, right, so that you know what you can do in a fall stewardship event. Then after that, we're going to do estate planning to just sort of prepare you for what is now being described as the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of the world. That's what's going on now. Are you enjoying that transfer as a congregation, or are you just letting it go right by? So that it'll go to your members' kids and your members, whether they need it or not, or the members' colleges, whether Harvard needs it or not, or Yale needs it or not. But you can go on and on, right? It could be other. It could be Muhlenberg, it could be any other. Muhlenberg needs it. The Wagner needs it. So you get the point. So a couple of the questions, and then the final session is going to be on how you would do a capital campaign. I just spent the last 16 years of my life doing capital campaigns, so I'll share some. John wanted me to share some things with you on that. And for some, I don't have to leave early. This is all going to be videoed, so you'll know how to do it. And a lot of estate planning is similar to capital campaigning. Some of the principles are the same. So the one question was, what should the pastor's role be in year-round stewardship? And speaking to my colleagues, I've got my collar on backwards, right? The number one is don't get in the way. All right? Don't let your hang-up, I'm talking to pastor now. Lay people, just put your hands over your ears, all right? But don't let your discomfort with money get in the way of people who have had a healthy autobiography of money. All right, and one of the things on the CD is for you to do it. We don't have time to do it, but just sort of talk about what is your relationship with money. Are you uneasy with money? Right? Did you grow up poor and so you feel deprived? You're not paid well enough, and so you feel embarrassed. Right? There are all kinds of things that come up with money. So some of us as clergy have hang-ups about money. Get out of the way. Let people who have a healthy view of money, right, work on that and teach you. I had to learn. I had to learn when I was making $7,000 a year, right? That I could be generous. And so the other thing that encourages people, so that's the negative part. The positive part is that if you are a good giver, and I hope you're not among the clergy who feel the church pays me, why should I give them back? Right? Why? Come on. I mean, there are so many clergy who believe that, right? I'm paid by the church. Why should I give it back? Everything I said before should contradict what the rationale for that. So, I mean, here's another hard saying. When I was a pastor in Baltimore, I shared with the congregation in every fall stewardship campaign how much my wife and I were giving. They knew what we were making. So this is an answer to the question, what can pastors do for year-round stewardship? They knew what we were making, and therefore, when I declared what we were making, many members of the congregation soon discovered that I was making $27,000 a year. This is back in the 70s, right? They were making $40,000 and $50,000. It didn't take but 6 or 7 months, and we were no longer the largest givers in the parish. Up to that point, we were the largest givers. On our income. You see the point? It was witnessing, right? So some of the stingies came up to me and said, "Yeah, Pastor Hill, but that you didn't tell people how much you make on weddings and funerals." So I went to my teacher, Wallace Fisher, and I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I put that in a special fund. The treasurer of the church knows how much comes in." It was $5,000 a year. They were right. $5,000 on top of $27,000 in the 1970s was a heck of a lot of money. And I learned that went to charitable purposes. And the treasurer and I knew about that, and he would vet that, so everybody knew what we were making. The other thing that pastors can do is when the opportunity to preach about money comes up, when the texts indicate that, and that's probably about 25-30% of the time, and I've not done a scientific study on that, but in the pericopes, preach on it. Don't dodge it. All right? You don't just have to preach about money during the season when we're talking about the coming kingdom of God, right? You can do that. It's just like if the texts call for a prophetic message, we preach a prophetic message. So use an occasion for that. Use a Bible study to talk about so many of these texts, right? Because remember, a Bible study is spiritual. Write your message once or twice on giving, right? In your pastoral message. Allow it to be in the bulletin on a regular basis. We'll see in the Walk with Jesus program. There are regular bulletin inserts. They're already written for you. All you have to do is have the discipline to put them in. All right? Remember I said, again, if you have some input into the newsletter, every newsletter, maybe quarterly, should have this note. Why should say, have you remembered, Ascension to your park, or your particular congregation in your estate planning, in your will. Why do I say that? I say that because do you know how much work it takes for somebody to change his or her will? Do you know how much motivation there is on that? Let me just tell you a personal story. My wife and I first wrote our will when we had our first kids, and cut off the video for this again. Back in the 1970s, right? In the 1970s, right? Guess when we just revised our will? This past week. Right? People are nodding. That's life. So that's where your people are too. And it's only because you have to keep after folks. How many times do the New York Giants tell you they're playing at a particular time during the week? Right? How many times do the Yankees and the Mets tell you that they're playing each other during the week? And do you think your people are any smarter than the or with it, right? Or have more time than sports fans? Did you get my point? Right? All of the TV shows, they advertise what they're going to show next during the show. They give you a little line underneath, right, that tells you what's coming up. A little person jumping around telling you, what, right? And what do? Oh, they should know. As people in my congregation, it's written in the bulletin, Pastor. Right? I'm not going to baby them, Pastor. Right? They should, right? We shoot ourselves in the foot by not competing, by not telling people, and then there should be a block in there that gives the language of how they can write the will and say, Ascension, Deer Park. I apologize for favoring that church, but that's just, I want to be fair. As we are. So do you understand what I'm saying? The language is actually there. And so all they have to do is take it to their attorney or wherever they go to, right? And attach it as a codicil, and you can even tell them, give 10% of the residual of your estate. 10% of the residual of your estate, and that way you can continue giving, to the rest of your life, right? But you see what I'm saying in terms of answering this, that the pastor is allowing something to happen, as opposed to saying they're going to think we're only interested in money. That's not the only thing you're interested in. What you're also doing is allowing people in your congregation who have the gifts to do things like that, right? To step right up. An earlier question was about the use of talents, right? A woman told me the other day, we were just having lunch, and she said, I used to run a corporation. Do you think my pastor ever, or anybody from the church ever came to me and asked me what I did and what I could do for this congregation? Isn't that sad? Pull out your handkerchiefs and weep for a moment. I mean, this woman was in her 80s. Nobody ever asked her what she did. And she said, had anybody asked, she said, I could have run so much of this congregation just out of my back pocket. Right? And meanwhile, one or two people are racing around. You know what the new term is for a lot of folks who don't go to church? The burned out. You know that, right? Some of you probably feel that. The burned out. And it's because we go to the same people over and over again. And one of the things in the CD is how you look at the assets of your congregation. The people that are there, what they do, what they can do. And you don't necessarily ask them for something that they don't want to do. Are you with me? Right? Because even their time and their talents have to be joys and expressions of joy. Oftentimes, school teachers do not want to teach in Sunday school, believe it or not. Right? We're talking, right? They deal with kids all the time. They'd much rather be on the worship and music committee or some other committee, right? Or maybe even the property committee. But they don't want to deal with kids. And yet, we think in a one-track way. Does that help answer that question about what pastors can do? Is just be part of the team. The other thing we got is that in one congregation, the offerings go down to the end of the aisle, and children put the offering plate, the offering in the offering plate. What a wonderful symbol, right? We become, this is no accusation of what you do because you all do this so well, but we become very adult in the way we worship. And the more we can involve children, the better. And if children are helping with the offering, right? They might just wonder as they grow older, what were we doing back then? What were people giving, right? Just a lovely idea. Okay, we're gonna go through a couple of things. And Pastor Hill gave me, did I steal it from you, Pastor Hill? This is done by the Episcopal Church, which has a magazine called Giving, and in that one there's a really helpful chart where it stops at an annual income of $225,000 a year. That's much closer to what you make in this room, or what some of your members make as family income. That's only half a joke. What I'd like to do is go through a couple of things to finish what I did in terms of the residential stewardship program and aggravate some of you even more. And that is that when we got to the point of people making commitments, the pastor, announced how much he or she, my congregation participated first. That's how I learned about it in the residential stewardship program. So my wife and I announced how much we were giving, right? It was controversial, made people angry. Then the council announced how much it had pledged. Not by name. We spent one whole council meeting talking about that. Not by name, but as a group, right? The program recommended that it be done by name. Why? Because leaders lead, right? And so the council pledged, and what the amount was there. Then all the committee chairs, right, pledged, and it was announced there. And then the rest of the congregation pledged. So in terms of the visiting, right, the president of the church council visited my wife and me and got our pledge. We visited them, got their pledge. And then council members visited, committee chairs visited, and it went all the way through the congregation. Our giving went up 50%. Just remember, I said that's the law of the most difficult. If the more time you spend in stewardship, the better the results. The more you want to just take shortcuts, the worse the results. The more you over-identify with people who are unemployed in your congregation, people who are on this fictitious fixed income, right? Have you heard that line, right? No. Pastor, you can't ask people to give more. So many of our people are on fixed incomes. Well, are you on a fixed income? No. Well, then why are you worried about people, who are on fixed incomes, right? It's a deflection. Right? Now, there are people on fixed incomes, but they may have assets that are more than yours, right? Do you understand? Right? Never assume that you know how much somebody else has until they tell you how much they can give or how much they can't give. Are you with me? Right? I mean, otherwise it's just simply transference and projection, right, on other people. So in your packets, there is a program called Walk with Jesus, and in that program, you are given, and now every congregation has it, not each of you has it, but every pastor has it. You have a complete, and Dr. Krey agrees, right? A really fine, pardon? Very much so. Very much so. A really fine stewardship program that is focused on discipleship. It begins with instructions for conducting the program. There's a poster for it. Bulletin inserts are written. The inspirational talk is written for your people. For a lot of folks, you want to ask somebody, would you please, say something about stewardship? Oh, I'm not a public speaker, I'm the chair of stewardship committee, but I can't do that. Well, maybe the person can't do it. It even talks about how to speak. Speak to the wall. Nobody ever taught me that. Speak to the back wall. So the folks way back in the kitchen can hear you. So, and it organizes the campaign in terms of what you can do, right? In terms of preparation, what walking with Jesus means, what discipleship means, how we need to I'm just walking through this, listening, all the way to then giving you the commitment sheet, right? So all done for you. The congregation just orders that. He's not going to, Keith Money's a very nice guy. He provided all these samples for you, free of charge. I think he will. I just want you to know that there will be some charge from the ELCA to send these to you, and it includes then the giving card, as I just said, and follow up. In everything that we're talking about, follow up is so important because people are busy, and if you send somebody a card, right? So that's after you have them all give on a particular Sunday, and they're not there. If you don't follow up, are they necessarily going to fill out a pledge card? No, or a commitment card. No. And you all know the rule about pledge or commitment cards, and you might as well say it clearly. If your financial situation changes, does God hold you accountable for a pledge that you made if you've been laid off? No, right? You may have the assets to. I'll just give you an example. I used to be the president of the seminary, made the big bucks. Now I'm on a sabbatical as a faculty member. We're still giving to our church what we were giving when I was the president. That's because I can afford it. If I couldn't afford it, you had better believe we would be giving less. Do you understand? Like things change, and you have to tell people that because we're so uncomfortable about money that we'll use any excuse not to pledge. Some people are religiously opposed to it. And do you have people like that in your congregation? Well, you just let them be, I guess, and you keep teaching stewardship, so that they come around, witnessing. A very important part of this is you have lay people get up and say why they give. I don't know why you give. And if you were to get up and say why you give, right, that's a powerful message. We once had a member at a congregation I served who was the stewardship chair, and this was his talk. For God, he was the principal of the school. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. And I am so thankful. That's why I give $40 a week. And he sat down. And that was in the 1970s. I still remember that. All these years later. I mean, it wasn't a long-winded speech. Was it a theology of stewardship? You better believe it was a theology of stewardship. Was it a witness? You had better believe it would. I could have preached, and pastors block your ears now, 5 sermons, and it wouldn't have been as powerful as what he did. Just saying why he gave, and that's also a model here. The other thing that I know a number of you, and I'm going to shift gears now. Does anybody have questions about what I just mentioned that I didn't cover? A number of you do this already. So how many have you done the Consecration Sunday? All right. That's sort of a model of the residential stewardship program, where you bring an outside resource person in. Have you had good experience with it? Herb Miller. Does anybody have no idea what I'm talking about? The consecration? Okay, then there are books up here, and I'll take a minute to describe them. What you do is, he begins in his first premise, this is Herb Miller, and there's a cost to it, as there are, you know, it's like Dr. Crown said, if you don't want to pay for Cliff's book, you're probably not going to read it, but you have to pay something, and this is a very modest cost. But basically what he says, and I disagree with him, but people don't want to visit anymore. That people are very reticent about, you know, in terms of the first model I gave you, right, where people are going to visit each other and actually present them. And I think that's a good first step. If you don't have a good stewardship program going, to do that first, you're going to hear, and make sure you take notes on that, you're going to hear a lot of stuff that you either want to hear or don't want to hear. And that is very important. I mean, what nonprofit has the ability to hear from its people, right, in their homes, how folks really feel about the ministry and what they would like to have happen? I mean, it's right. We have a real gift there. He starts out by saying people don't want to do that anymore. So you do it in the context of Sunday morning. Rule number one is you have to have a resource person. That usually means another pastor come in and lead it for you, because that person holds you accountable to what you're doing. And you have 3 sessions, first with the leadership, right, in teaching, and then with a larger group, always around meals, and the meals are catered so that the person back in the kitchen doesn't have to slip, all right? So and it's kind of a nice thing, right? It's done on the model of you honor everybody, and not that I don't mean to say that, right? But you know what I mean? So you're not having the women, or you know, the women's group, right, prepare something for everybody. You cater a meal for the leadership with a resource person, and then when you have the celebratory banquet at the end, where you announce what you know, the increase that you have, that is also catered, and people make reservations, and it could be a tablecloth event. So giving is celebrated and honored in all of this. So the outside resource person is the one who preaches, right? And then on this consecration Sunday, you know, everybody has been sent or given their commitment forms, and then they bring them in on consecration Sunday, and they are consecrated. You know, just like Nawan says, it's a sacramental thing, right? As we make these pledges, it is done in a very honored and beautiful way, so that people feel that their gifts are honored. And I think oftentimes we don't do that, right? We don't really honor the gifts. And then, of course, the most important part of it is follow-up. I mean, because there are lots of people who are not going to be there for Consecration Sunday, and you've got to give them opportunity to get their commitment cards in. There, of course, is a chart, not as good as the Episcopal one, but there is a chart at the end, and it encourages proportional percentage giving. Right? See, that's if you haven't learned anything at all in this, on this day, what you want to get people away from is to put, now I'm going to be extremely generous, $10 in the plate, right? How many of you just see that happening in your congregation all the time? People are just, without any plan, without any regularity, you know, right? No intention. They're just putting what they can. You can see it happening, right? The women go for their purses, and it's as if they're in church all the time. It's as if they don't even think about the offering, right? Oh my gosh, they're the plates. Oh, I don't have any cash on me. Can you loan me $5? Right? And you know, we're trying to proclaim the gospel, the kingdom of God on the basis of a haphazard kind of way, right, of giving. And so all these recommendations are to encourage people to give intentionally, regularly, proportionately, as a percentage, off the top, so that they know what they're giving beforehand. And all of that takes work on your part, right? That's why, many are called, few are chosen in this business. Right? I mean that you're taking on a very rigorous work if you want to meet your goals. So that's consecration. So those of you who do it, did I miss anything on the Consecration Sunday program? It's a wonderful way of doing a very rigorous fall stewardship campaign without doing the every member visit, because it includes everybody, and he guarantees about a 30% increase the first time you do it. Yeah.
I was just going to say that there are 2 follow-ups because you make calls and people haven't made a reservation.
Thank
for
you.
the celebration dinner the week before.
That's
that
right.
Encourages.
Did everybody hear that? You make phone calls to the people who have not made reservations to this celebratory dinner. Thank you. I missed that. So it's very detailed, and the good results are all in the details, right? And as to how you pull that off. The third one, and I'm not going to go into it because it's in your packet and so thorough, is in the congregational packet. It's called Stewards of God's Love. And this is a recommendation for year-round stewardship. All right? And it has things about, eco-justice and stewardship of the earth. And it's just fabulous. But it's a year-round stewardship emphasis, which I commend to you, but would take too much time for me to go into it. In the back, for each of you who are representing the congregation, is the bibliography that we have here for you. Okay, so Ask, Thank, Tell, and Not Your Parents' Offering Plate are here among others, and all of the ELCA stewardship resources with their documents. So what we have for you here is there, and then also a way of, and this is something you might want to do with your stewardship committee, and that is writing a personal money autobiography. So if, for your leaders, maybe doing it with your council, maybe doing it with your pastor, and the planning calendar for year-round stewardship. So you just have it for yourself there. Any quick questions on this? Because what I want to switch to now is how to, and the importance of what's called a narrative budget. It's in the CD, it's kind of a long thing, so I don't think I'll even put it up on the screen. But you have it here, and then I'll conclude this hour with building a case, because that's an important part of a narrative budget. Does anybody? So this is in your materials, all right? So you all have this. Not each of you individually, but every congregation will have this. Do you know the difference between a narrative budget and a line item budget? Does anybody have a narrative budget? You've done one. Okay. You do. Okay. So what this little booklet begins by saying is that you've done all of this work about teaching people about stewardship, right? You've done so much work, and then when you come up with the budget in January or whenever you approve it, you might approve it in July, all you simply have is lines. The line item budget, which is boring, and doesn't motivate anybody, right? Except for people like me who like to read budgets like that, because that's what I've spent my life doing, right? Studying budgets. So those who put them together love them, right? And want everybody else to know how important they are. The rest just sort of goes, are we in the red or are we in the black, right? And how much have we taken out of the endowment? And is my memorial fund protected, right? That's what I want to know. So a narrative budget takes all of the church's ministries and puts them in the budget in a narrative way so that, and I'm going to again pick on Pastor Hill, I really don't know what he does. I know he works on Sundays. The rest of the time, I don't know what he does, right? Very clear you're not laughing. They do what you do?
They wonder what I do.
Yeah, sure. So probably the finest narrative budget I've seen is by a friend of mine who was a pastor of a large Baptist church in Philadelphia. And this clever son of a gun has put all of his time, has spread it out over all the ministries of the congregation. So choir ministries, right? A portion of the pastor's budget is there. Because he spends a lot of time with the choir in planning worship music, right? Or you take the Sunday school, right? 10% of his time is there with Sunday school, separated from Christian education, which has, the ladies' ministries, right? He spends some time. Do you see what's happening, right? So as people look at his salary, first of all, it would only take a John Cron or some of the others here to add it all up and see how much he's really making, right? But what it does is it spreads his salary and all of the staff salaries across the ministries, and describes the ministries along the lines of what I'm going to move to next, and that is in terms of the case. Right? What is it that you do? So it's not what does Pastor Hill do, right? It's what does the congregation do? Well, what do you represent? What do you mean in the community? I would bet you there are some clergy here who don't, if they're relatively new to their congregations, who probably don't know fully what the congregation does. Do you understand what I'm saying? Right? I'm helping out this little congregation, and not little, it's one of the largest African American congregations in the ELCA in Mount Airy. And every time I'm there, I discover something else that they do. They just this past week they collected toiletries for this social service agency, and carloads of soaps and shampoos, and I wouldn't even know all the stuff that people brought. Went to a homeless shelter, and I'm just suddenly going there. Oh my gosh, that's just wonderful. And they did that by having a dinner dance, and that was the admissions. That was the admission. You had to bring something, for this homeless shelter. In terms of marketing, right? I mean, that's just incredible. But how many of you have heard people say in your congregation, I don't go anymore because it doesn't do anything for me? Is that why you don't go anymore? No. Right? Have you heard people say that? Right? And whose fault is that? We usually project on them, and we say it's because they're narcissistic. Right? They're all about themselves. We do all kinds of things like that in the church. Somebody disappears from church, and we immediately assume they're mad. Right? You finally go and visit them, and what do you usually find out? somebody's sick in the family, there's some crisis and they couldn't be there, and nobody knows, right? And so the same thing about people who get disenchanted with the church. We don't market ourselves well enough by doing what's called a narrative budget. And it's a lot of work, but it takes every single line and interprets it for the people. Now, I think some of you who were nodding, probably not to sleep on me, but because this is budget time, we're really now in the weeds. Some of you are probably saying we did it once and we don't need to do it every year, right? Because it's a lot of work to do it every year. But the recommendation, this congregation that does really well, I mean, their budget is in the millions. They feel that they have to do it so that they can sustain the level of giving to which they're brought to people. Remember, again, what Cliff has taught us, and that's that Cliff Christopher, you've got all these folks out there competing for your people's money, right? I'll tell you a little story, then we'll do the case, and then I'll take some questions. But I once, a seminary president went to a large manufacturer. They make batteries. Little guy became a dear friend of mine, and they're one of the largest battery makers in the world. There's probably batteries around in this room that are made by Deca batteries. I'm just looking for some things to demonstrate what he did for me. So he knew I was coming, and his desk was about this big, this long. Short fella, sitting behind the desk. Here I was, the new president of the seminary, and he had staged a pile about this big in front of him. And he's looking over at me. I'm on the other side, wondering, whether we could get him to give to our most recent capital campaign. And he said, "Young man," I wasn't that young, but he was quite my senior. He says, "Young man, I just want to show you what came in this week." He said, "This came from the Scouts, and this came from, the Salvation Army, and this." Now you get the picture, right? And he's throwing them over his shoulder, right? And somewhere in here, there's something from you. And he found it. And, all over. And I'm just going, and I said, "Oh my gosh, what am I in for?" Right? So now the pile's lower, so I could actually see his face. And I just sort of said to him, "Will we ever be able to have he's Lutheran, right? And he loves his pastor." So I said, "Will we ever be able to get something from you?" And he said, "Get in line." And we got in line. And he's built a building for us. So the point is, you have to make a case, right? Which we did. And for here, listen to this. For him, it was, we love our pastor, right? And I've been rough on my colleagues who wear their collars backwards here, but we know that is right. What is our leadership? The pastors are the ones who proclaim the gospel, who administer the sacraments, right? And so the pastor has to be part of the case. That is what we're actually saying, right, to the people. What we does everybody follow me? Right? So that. Can you imagine? Here I thought we had to describe some fancy thing to this fellow in terms of what we needed, and no, he's giving because he loves his pastor, who happens to be an alum of the school, and people relate to us that way. So the pastor is sort of, or the leader is, some of our churches are led by other people, right, is sort of part of the case, right? But then beyond that, we need to make a case, according to, to one of the documents that you have in here, a case for what we do, not to be redundant, but it's because that's what everybody else is doing. You follow? Right? Everybody else is telling you what it is that they do. Do you know what the largest charity in the U.S. is? Is St. Jude's Hospital, right? And you can just see, how they make a case for what they do, and so people give more to St. Jude's than to any other charity in the country. So, what is your case? And here's where I would advise that you do a lot of work, because one of the things that many of us are doing in the church is mission confusion. Right? We're so desperate to survive that we don't even know what our mission is anymore. Can you resonate with that? Right? So lead with what is your primary mission, right? That we're gathered for worship, right? That we're gathered to praise God. We're gathered to be disciples of Jesus. Would everybody just say that with me? Just say the word Jesus. Jesus. Does it feel funny? Good. A lot of Lutherans have trouble saying that word, right? We
Usually said in the wrong context.
It's usually, you better believe it. He said that, not me. It's usually said in the wrong context, right? But what we are doing is we're witnessing to the crucified and resurrected Christ. And why is that so hard to say? Right? Why is it so hard for us to tell other people that that's exactly what we're about? So lead with that. But then you have lots of other ministries as well that you do. And if you think that your people know, they don't. Unless they're the ones who are ready to get burned out and are part of everything. Most of your folks do not know all the things that are going on in your church. So as you make the case, right, you have to be very clear and comprehensive about all the things, leading with the gospel, right, leading with worship, leading with what the pastor or then the assistant pastor and the deacons, the associate pastors, the Stephen ministry, right? Lead with what you do at the core, and then start describing the case. Now, when we get to a capital campaign, it may be a different case, right? It may be the need for a new building or something like that, right? But show what it is you do. There was a study done by the University of Pennsylvania Urban program that indicated that every congregation in this country does about $450,000 worth of ministry in this community. Just think about that. In kind. $450,000 worth of ministry. Now, would you be able to itemize that for your people so that your people would know, what you do, in this community, providing free space, right, or your community, clothing drives and food pantries, right? I mean, you just could go on and on and on. The only thing that I invite you to be very careful about is that you not get involved in mission confusion. Do you know what I mean by that? So that, in other words, that you think that your food pantry is your core ministry. all right? And the question you have to ask yourself is if somebody else can do it, is that our core ministry? That doesn't mean you don't do it, right? But if the Salvation Army can do it and do it better, is that our core ministry? Your core ministry is Word and Sacrament ministry, Christian education, right? Raising up young people, your youth groups, you know what I'm talking about, right? And if you find out that you've got this kind of confused message, so that you can't even figure it out, then building a case is going to be very important.
I find that it's really...
Do you want to go to can you go to the mic or?
No, I talk pretty loud.
Okay.
I find that it's a thing about respect and also about prioritizing your values, because I come from an elderly congregation, and people are very, they're very budget conscious, and they're very old school thought of saving, and we don't have enough money for this and enough money for that, yet they feel nothing about laying out like, $25 for pasta night and all kinds of things. So I'm the stewardship chair at my church. I tried to get them, hit them home. And I'm also a Jewish believer, so I figured I'd give them the Jewish guilt plus the Lutheran thing.
That is a double whammy. I'll repeat this for you.
So anyway, I tried a campaign of getting them in very small doses. We did this pennies from heaven thing, and I said little by little it makes sense to work for Jesus, and it really took off, and people were putting their money, but they literally took me literally of putting pennies when it was supposed to be change. So now people put their shiniest pennies in there, and this lady's so happy that she works for a store and she gets the newest pennies. And I just find that it's a battle to just get it started, and my enthusiasm has spread, but then it goes to a lull and it goes to a dip, and after a while you just can't get through to these people, and I feel like I need batteries to get energized or something.
Really, so what she was describing, is you're working with an elderly congregation that wants to save, right? And people will spend $25 on a spaghetti dinner, but what they get really excited about is saving pennies for giving pennies for, and literally pennies, for a particular ministry, right?
A campaign.
And a campaign, and she uses both Lutheran and Jewish guilt, so that's what I said. That's a double whammy. I want to be clear. I mean, I grew up, and I bet some of the other pastors here grew up in an era where our national church, many of our teachers, hammered away at fellowship events that involved raising money. The congregations I served in Baltimore would do oyster dinners and primarily by women, crab cake dinners and sauerbraten dinners, etc. And they would make $5,000 a crack, right? And people came in and they would say, they shouldn't be doing that. We should have a central budget. Because what always happened was the men of the congregation, when I first came to the congregation, were all men on the council. And the men would have to go to the women every December and beg for enough money to balance the budget. And they were humiliated, and the women allowed them to be humiliated, and would meet, and then finally would write the check, right? It was a ritual. And there was a lot, the women weren't on the council. There was, a lot of us missed a lot of things that went on there, and there was fellowship going on, right, and community building that was going on, and people were supporting the church. Now, I am a firm believer. You heard all that I had to say about raising the budget, right? Percentage giving and all that I said, right? I am not opposed to community building events, because the church is no less than Word and Sacrament ministry, but it is also more than Word and Sacrament. Are you with me? I'm going to conclude, John, because I can see the way you're standing. Oh, no, all right, that I'm about to leave my time. Let me just tell you a story. This was when I first became president of the seminary. I went to the Harvard School for New Presidents. And the president and so this is a transition to our next two topics. The president of Wellesley College was one of our presenters. She told two stories. One was that she inherited a sort of a donor relation where they were trying to get $10 million from a couple, and her predecessor, who was male, just did not succeed. They knew they had it, right? They knew there was a willingness to give. There has to be intent, capacity, right? And then you have to actually get it. And they just weren't getting the commitment in this capital campaign. So when she became president, she inherited this donor relationship, and she went, and being a woman, she looked at both the husband and the wife, right? And her eyes went to both. And when they said yes, the wife said, well, it's my money. And guess what the male president did? He just looked at the man. He just looked at the husband. He did the ask of the husband the whole time. And the answer was always no, And do you see how important it is, right?
Sure.
To pay attention. This same president said that she was part of a congregation one time, and she was, and this is the real story now, as I end this piece. She was part of the Ladies Auxiliary, and she was just joining it. And every year, this group of women had an event that raised $15,000 for the congregation. And so she's a new member. She comes in, and as they're planning the event, the first 45 minutes of the hour, they're talking about their friends who are sick, the medications they're taking, they're socializing, and she said she's a businesswoman. She became the president of Wellesley College. She's becoming more and more annoyed, right? And she said, then finally, in the last 5 minutes, the women went, you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this. Yeah, we'll do this, qualifying, good. The meeting's adjourned. And she went and she said to them, she said, why don't you just do the last 5 minutes, and then I would get back to my work, right? And she said she nearly destroyed that program because they were so upset. But do you hear what I'm saying? They were so, because what was going on? Ministry, fellowship. And so often we forget that, right? The raising $15,000 a year was only an excuse for them to get together and worry about who was sick, who needed to be seen, and who needed to be cared for. So when I talk about focus and prioritization, all right, don't miss the many ministries that are going on, the wonderful ministries that are going on in your congregations, because you're allowing the space for it, right? You're letting it happen.